So, but we must think that it's, these concepts are from the ancient world, right? And they have rolled over into our world, right? And so this is what Guthrie is talking about. It's not to go too far with it, right? But we must try to understand why they were there to begin with, right? I mean, because we are, if you want to be scholars, you just can't say, well, nowadays we say this, therefore it is what it is. Well, okay, but then you're not really doing scholarship. You need to go back and try to, well, what were they doing? Why is everything so male-oriented? What's the deal? Yeah, the context, exactly, right, that's important. So, the Spirit of God of Israel. The Spirit is at work in God's creation and preservation of the world and human life in it. In both the Old and New Testaments, the word Spirit literally means wind and breath of life, and simply life, right? Think about the creation account, right? And it's really interesting because there's really two of them in Genesis, right? One of them we have
The Spirit.
But humanity, God creating humanity. Yeah. There's really two of them. The first one is, whoa, don't take one of those, I need those. All right, God takes a rib, right? And then the other one is God kind of makes mud,
right,
and kind of designs humanity. And then what does God do?
Breathes
the breath of life, right? Brephos. God breathes into humanity and gives humanity life. So when we think about the term spirit, especially within the Hebrew scriptures, spirit literally means breath. It's God's breath, right? And so as the ancient Hebrews understood it, or as they understood it, is what keeps us alive is God's breath. Mm-hmm. God gave us breath, and that's why we live, right? We have the ability to breathe. And then by their observation, what happens when, Jedediah is walking down the street and a boulder falls off the cliff and knocks him on the head? And now he's no longer with us. What happens?
His
spirit's gone. Why do we say that? Is he breathing anymore? Nope. Done. Right? God's breath has now left that guy. Right? And so, if you think about it, it's a very beautiful way to look at it. Right? To think that, and it's very practical in that sense. Right? We breathe, right? And within the creation story, God breathes within humanity, and now we have the Spirit of God. And in this argument, it's everything. It's anything that respirates, right? Anything that breathes, right? So it's dogs and cats and animals. Think about it. It's a great observation to say that if you're breathing, you're alive.
Yeah.
If you're not breathing, you're dead, right? And so, again, but it's a beautiful way to look at the Spirit, right? And that comes from Genesis, right? That comes from the beginning, right? That God actually breathes life into God's creation. And whoop, now we're awake, right? And we're doing things. 2, in the Old Testament, the Spirit of God is the source of all human culture, art, creativity, and wisdom. We think about our culture. And we have ways of, especially now in the postmodern world, I mean, everything is compartmentalized, right? Mm-hmm. Right? God is over there in the church. God lives in the church. And we're over here, right? So if I'm an artist and I paint this, well, it's mine, right? If I'm a bright man or bright woman, it's because I worked hard, I studied, I listened to my mom and dad when they said prepare for these exams, and I did well, and I got a scholarship to college, and I went on to graduate school and then postgraduate school, and look at me, I did all this stuff, right? Culture. And so it's separated, but in the ancient world, it wasn't separated, right? Especially within the Hebrew Scriptures. everything is connected to God. Remember, Israel, ancient Israel, is a theocracy, right? Or it was supposed to be set up as a theocracy, right? And that kind of gets derailed when Israel demands what?
A king.
A king, right.
Yeah.
And God and Samuel try to dissuade them. Ooh, why do you want to be like your neighbors, don't you? Which is the truth, right? They want to be like their neighbors. But as the ancient Hebrews saw it, the Spirit is this, God is the inspiration for all of this. There is no separation. There is no secular and religious. It's all the same. It's all the same, right? So again, the context is very important here. Because, and even when we are as faithful as we think we are all products of our worldview. We're all products of our culture. Me, you, all of us are, right? When we're sitting there watching a basketball game, how often do we think, oh, God is equipping, look at these young men or young women, they're strong, God is... No, you're watching a basketball game, you're cheering on your team, right? It just shows that we are all products of our own worldview, that we also, even church members, we lose this. We also begin to compartmentalize. That's the worst word to say. It's almost as bad as Worcestershire. But I could say Worcestershire because it's food. Because it's food, I say it no problem. But we do. Even the church does. We do. We say, oh, that's secular. This is separate, right? And as a nation, there's no question that God is definitely sown within the tapestry of this nation, but the separation of church and state is also the separation of church and state is also sown into the tapestry of this nation, right? It's kind of both, and so we have been moving in this direction for a long time. So we must understand within, especially the Hebrew Scriptures, the Spirit's involved in everything, and this is the world of the ancient Hebrews. And it really, and if you think about it, think about the New Testament. God is involved in everything also. It's kind of hard when you deal with the Romans, and even for the Hebrews, it's becoming modernized. And you see that, okay, now you have a more secular group like the Herods, right? And it begins even within the New Testament, right? Secularization, right? The Herods, they go to temple, but it's more of like, we go to temple because it's a thing to do, right? I don't know how faithful the Herods were to their people as they're busy slaughtering, 2-year-old boys to try to snuff out, the Christ child, right? All right. So, and the final one in the Spirit of God of Israel, 3, the Spirit is the Spirit of God who is on the side of all who are helpless, poor, wretched, and oppressed because they have been forgotten or excluded by the rich and the powerful. Now this, people might say, well, what? What do you mean by that? And my response is, read the Bible. Read the Bible. God definitely has a special place within God's heart for vulnerable people. It's in there. Right? Remember the old spaghetti sauce commercial? It's in there. It's in there. I would be lying to you if I said, oh, no, don't. It's not in there. Don't worry about it. It is. It definitely is. Hebrew Scriptures, and then Jesus takes it and multiplies it to the nth degree. And it's, when you look at these groups that Guthrie has listed, what are some of the things that they have in common?
Which list?
In 3.
Oppression.
They're oppressed, most definitely.
Vulnerable.
That's it.
Right.
That's it. They're vulnerable. So you can take some of these names and kind of like move things around. Like you can say widows. Yeah. You can say aliens. You can say orphans. There's so many ways that you can move things in and out. Whenever you have a people group that is oppressed, you can slide it right in there. And so the importance of this is that God, throughout the scriptures, both the Hebrew scriptures and the New Testament, has a very special place for the vulnerable. And it really makes God upset. And that's putting it very lightly. That's candy coated. God gets like angry is probably the better term. When people are abused because they are vulnerable, right? And so when people say to me, oh, nations are going to be judged, we're going to be judged because how we treat, because how we accept this, this, and this. And my response is, that's funny, because I agree with half of your premise. Yes, God is going to be angry. God gets angry about how our nation treats, but it's not that group of people. It's this other group of people. And Jesus hit that point ad nauseum, right? If Jesus ever had a soapbox, it usually has to deal with that term he says, the least of these.
Right.
He talked about that all the time, right? And so
The Beatitudes.
the Beatitudes, yeah, yes. I mean, if you ever have something that just takes society and just turns it upside down on its head, it's the Beatitudes. And that's scary if you are one that's in power. And I'm not saying all political rulers or kings or queens are crooked. Not what I'm saying, right? If that would be the case, all of history would be genocide. But it wasn't, right? So I'm not saying that all people in power were like this, right? There were good people too that governed and ruled. But it's the individuals that do take advantage of people. Yeah, most definitely. It does happen, and this God does not like, right? And so Jesus speaks out against these instances and says, no, this is bad. And one day, you will answer for these crimes, right? So it's not that Jesus is saying all rich people are this, all wealthy. No. That is a gross misinterpretation of what Jesus is saying. Jesus is saying, if you do have power, it's a gift, right? Money is neutral. It is money, power. These are neutral things. You can do wonderful things with the gifts that God has given to you. But
I
you
noticed
can
something
also...
important.
What's that?
I noticed something important.
What did I miss?
Are you a Christian? What's new?
Am I doing the same thing over again?
It's like we had, one. It says justification, and then the problem of justification, and starting with A,
Oh, no.
it dives right back into what we did before.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
Well, I noticed the page numbers went down, and I was like, "Why is this
Oh,
314?" And then we
yeah.
go back to 293.
Look at that. Is it the whole thing?
Yeah, right. Pretty much. Yeah, I think so.
All right. I will
It was
correct
worth
this.
repeating.
No, it's not worth it. We were on the Spirit for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'll
It's like,
adjust
this
that.
year is spirit centered.
Yes, it is.
Well, I
Thank
just
you.
said, but we talked about the Spirit.
Well, as I made the notes, I use template. I just go over the...
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Good job, Andy.
We'll come back
Yeah.
next. It's time.
Somebody's
And,
awake, huh?
Somebody's
Somebody's
awake.
awake.
Good, thanks, Andy.
Right.
Somebody's awake. So hand these all in, would you?
Alrighty.
John,
And we're
should
done.
side